So fun to be here. I think I win for the longest title talk of the event, so gold star for me. I'm probably going to be looking all over the place. I'll try to look at you through my camera. I'm also going to be looking down here and drawing along. And I also have the Slack channel up on another computer here, and I'm going to try to keep an eye on questions and see if I can answer them throughout the session as well. So you are here because you're interested in learning a little bit about the magic behind what I did this morning. And if you've been at SANS events before, then you've seen the drawing unfold. So just going to pull back the curtain a little bit and show you today some of the very non-complicated elements that I use to put together these drawings. So you are here for this workshop, and we're going to spend approximately another 39 minutes together. So here's my agenda for today. I'm going to just spend a few more minutes talking about who I am, why I'm here, and all that good stuff. And then I'm going to get into what is sketchnoting, where we sketchnote, when we do it, and some of the why behind it. I'm going to spend a huge chunk of our time together going through the graphic fundamentals, because they are fun and not scary, I promise. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we try to put some of these pieces together. And I'm going to really actually try to leave some time for the Q&A. But what I would love for you to do in the questions for speakers Slack channel, if you have questions throughout this, please ask them and I'll keep an eye, but also tag me. So if you could do the @ and tag me so that all the questions don't get lost and I can't find them later. So if you could tag me, that would be amazing. And during the lunch break, I will see what I can do to answer them. And if I don't get to all of them, I will answer them after the event today. So, all right. So hi, my name is Ashton, and I am actually calling in today from Nova Scotia, Canada, which is on the traditional and stolen land of the Mi'kmaq people. My pronouns are she and her, and just a little visual description of myself. I am a Caucasian woman with short, oddly symmetrical hair. It usually has a little purple in it, but it's kind of faded out. I'm wearing this like weird mustard color shirt with a red plaid blouse over top, and I have a purple wall behind me, and I've got a little faces poster beside me. So again, my name is Ashton, and I have been doing this type of work for almost 10 years now, which is pretty wild. And I've drawn out over 2,300 of these types of graphics, 8 or so of them, which we will do today. And I, first and foremost, a mom, and I think they're outside screaming right now, a mom of 3 kids. All right, so what is sketchnoting? So you'll notice in the channel today, it's actually called graphic recordings. Graphic recording is what I call this work when I'm doing it for other people. Sketchnoting is the term that I use when people are doing it for themselves. I am using a document camera. Paula just asked that. I'm using this as a document camera. If you want the specs on it later, I will share that. But the brand, not that I'm pitching a brand or anything, is this here, IPEVO. But I think there's lots of different kinds, so don't get hung up on a brand. Very sharp. Thank you very much, Paul. So sketchnoting is the term that I use when we take drawings and we take words and we combine those together. And one of the reasons why we do this, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of brain science today because I do want us to draw together, is this idea that Alan Pavio came up with, is called the dual coding theory, which takes words and accompanies them with images or pictures And our brains, when we put those two together, it like helps solidify that learning. So at its very core, this is part of the why we do this, instead of, how a lot of us probably learned, or just by default doing our note taking in long lines on sheets of paper in school. We do something like this, where we have the images across the piece of paper, usually on a blank piece, which I'll get into in a minute. But pairing those together just helps solidify that information in our brain. What is hiding under this one? Oh, our statistic for the day as well. So doodling can increase our memory of that information by 29%, which is pretty awesome. So even if you don't incorporate a lot of sketchnoting into your note taking, just the sheer fact of doing some little doodles actually helps you remember that information up to 29% more, which is super sweet. What is Julie? Not me taking notes in the presentation. All good, all good. How do you deal with listening and drawing at the same time? We're going to talk about that later, Adam. Okay. So when do we do this? When we are experiencing very complex information. Sketchnoting can be used in many different ways, which we'll talk about in a second. But when the information is at a high level of complexity, is a very great opportunity to use sketchnoting, because we need to help simplify information for ourselves and maybe the people around us. And where do we do sketchnoting? We can do them in meetings. We can do during lectures. We can do them during conferences. Anything audio, so a podcast, a webinar, audiobook, documentaries, written content, which isn't my favorite. I prefer audio, but written content. Basically anywhere where you're hearing information or trying to digest information and make it more meaningful and understanding for yourself. And at its very core, if you're going to write anything down, this is the thing I want you to write down. So we want to take the idea that drawing is this like scary thing that we look at and we think, well, we can't do that, or I can't draw this, or I can't even draw a straight line, or I can't even draw a stick person, or what have you. We want to reframe drawing as an action to help us learn. So we want to think about it as drawing is see, it's not always perfect, thinking tool. So we're using drawings, and Sketchnote is the container to do that as a thinking tool. All right. And hushing that inner critic for sure, John, for sure. Does it have to be doodling that is related to the topic of the discussion, or could just be doodling? So doodling straight up, as the statistic says, just doodling for doodling's sake. Another way that I describe sketchnoting is doodling with purpose. So you're just taking some of those doodles that you might do anyways or create anyways, and just making them a little bit more purposeful for the information that you're creating. One of the biggest questions that I tend to get is, well, isn't what you're doing distracting? And my response to that usually is like, we always have distractions. We're always going to be distracted in many different ways, but it's actually a healthy distraction, if you want to call it that, because it's actually helping you stay focused on the information at hand. It's called cognitive anchoring. See, John, you're so smart. Awesome. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to dive into it. How are we doing for time? Awesome. All right. Keep those questions coming. I really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, and I should have prefaced this at the beginning when we got interrupted by my littlest one, is if you don't have a pen and a paper, go and grab that now while I'm just setting this up for us. If you have a tablet and you want to draw on that, that would be cool. you take notes and draw just a few little things along this workshop, then you're just going to help, it's going to help you remember it a little bit more long term. I didn't get a chance to before the workshop today, but I will create an actual sketch note or a graphic recording of this workshop, and we'll post it later. I just didn't get my act together before this to do that. So, when we start, ideally we have a blank piece of paper. Blank paper, which in itself can be a bit intimidating. I know it can be a bit intimidating, but we want to get away from writing everything in lines like how we just talked about, right? Pencil is great because then you can erase it, but you can also always scratch stuff out and write beside it. It's not such a big deal. You want it to be very forgiving. If you know that the title of the presentation or documentary, whatever you're listening to, sometimes it can be really helpful at the beginning. If you have some time, a few minutes, finding a part on your paper, usually I do mine at the top, and preparing a title. That kind of just gets you settled into what you're going to be capturing and takes away the fear of entering into a blank page when you have it sort of already set up and ready to go. A title should take no more than 10 to 15% of your page. All right. So that's an amazing thing about sketchnoting. That's literally all you need to get started is a piece of paper and something to write with. If you want to do it on a tablet, that's cool, or an iPad. That's amazing, but it's absolutely not necessary. All right, I'm just going to hop in the Slack channel and see how we're doing over here. How do you not miss information? Oh, great question. I need to write some of these down. Misinformation. I have some hacks for that. We'll talk about at the end. Dysgraphia, yes. Has always been hard. Okay, so actually, I have a friend who's a teacher, and she taught she taught this sketchnoting skill to one of her students, and she actually gave me permission to have the case study. So let me dig up that case study and share it, because it follows a student throughout the course of a year, from when they started with their regular note taking and how sketchnoting improved. And he actually created a sketch note of how sketchnotes helped him improve his handwriting and his cognition, which was super cool. Abigail, yeah, feel free to draw this along with me. Cool. Yeah, a lot of people don't like their handwriting, which we're going to get right into here. I hear you, Joshua, for sure. All righty. Okay. So I know I didn't answer all the questions here, but I will, I promise. All right, so the first thing, what's really super foundational to sketchnoting is our letters. And I'm hearing from Joshua and some others that we're not a huge fan, or we struggle with our writing. And I'm sure there's so someone's saying that cursive helps them, which is awesome. So you want to be able to write in a way that you're going to be able to understand it. And that's why sketchnoting is a really powerful tool, because if you can create a little drawing and less about words, that's even better, right? It doesn't have to be a whole lot of words, but if you can just write one word and a simple little drawing to go with it, that's great. But I'm going to give you just a few little tips here to kind of help you with your sketchnoting process. One of them, which we just mentioned a whole bunch already, is taking our sentences from going in long lines like this. And we're going to capture our information in like an imaginary square. So it's not always going to be perfect, but I am going to encourage you later throughout the event to look at my graphic recordings that I've done, and you'll see that I do this all of the time in mine. So write in a box. when you take this simple idea and put it in a little box like this, it just helps contain it so that you can more easily add images and other words and information around it. Whereas if you're writing long sentences across your page, it doesn't allow you the flexibility as much to be able to move things around. It looks like Michael's saying that studying technical drawing and drafting helped him improve his lettering, which is super cool. Yeah, there's lots of lettering things out there to support folks. Yeah, and someone's also saying that they haven't used pen and paper in a while. So yeah, that can be a struggle for sure. But yeah, just practice writing, your letters. I write in all capitals because that's what I'm most comfortable with. I'm not a huge fan of my lowercase, and I've just leaned into my capital letters. I know sometimes that can be a little bit hard for people to read, but I try to make them as clear and concise, and each letter exactly the same. So the guide that Michael just posted, if you take notice when you're writing your letters, ideally you have, every time you write that letter, it's going to look kind of similar, which might be a challenge for folks that have the dysgraphia, but yeah, that's sometimes a nice way to help keep it as clean as possible so you can read it later. As long as you can read it and understand, that's all that matters. If you want to kind of create this space to find, because a lot of time with sketchnoting, you have to capture quickly. So you can write really quickly out the alphabet, and then you can write it really slow. And then you want to find that in between. So you can see this is, more messy, this is more neat, and this is like an in-between. So there's a little exercise for you to try later. Okay. Have I ever experimented with something like Excel, Row, Notion? No, I prefer to do everything by hand, but I'm sure there's like some really great tools out there. Also, color. Oh my gosh, just so many questions. Okay, I'm just going to continue on and see, and then I'm going to spend all my time at the end answering questions, hopefully. All right, cool. All right, so the first thing after letters, after we've got started on a blank piece of paper, we're going to draw some lines. So hopefully if you're drawing along with me, just draw a line. I find you can create a cleaner line if you don't hesitate and you just draw quickly. Doesn't have to be a straight line too. Once you kind of get comfortable with that, do some wiggles, do some jagged ones. Just get comfortable with putting pen to paper again, especially if it's been a while, if you've been out of practice. Just practice drawing some lines. Go ahead and do that. So I'm going to talk about some of the benefits and how we can use lines and arrows in a second, but we're just going to talk about arrows first and then combine these two together. So arrows is a line with a point. All right, we did it. You can draw an arrow, line with a point. You can jazz it up as much as you want. Let's put a little circle at the end of that. If you want to be able to draw an arrow like this, that is even every time you draw it. We're going to walk through a little exercise. This is another opportunity for you to put pen to paper. We're going to create a box here. It's going to be open on this end, okay? And these end at the same point, roughly. Okay, then we're going to play a little connect the dot game. So we're going to imagine a line out here and imagine a line out here equal distance. So, and we're just going to put two little dots there. Okay, I can tell on my screen here it's not great, right? So let's put it here. And then we're going to imagine a line down the middle, and then we're just going to pick a point out there. And then all you're doing is playing connect the dots. So line, line, and then connect at the end. So if you play this connect the dot game every time you do an arrow, then it allows you to create an arrow that's always going to be like symmetrical in design. but you can change the body of it. So you do something like this. We've got our opening, right? We're doing our line out. After you get lots of practice, you don't have to do the connect the dots necessarily, and then out to the end. Okay, it's just building up your muscle memory. All right. So yeah, you can do lots of different shapes. They can be fat, they can be skinny, they can be all different sizes. Cool. I find working with paper easier for memory retention. I know that, Joshua, there is some stats around that, but I don't have them or know for sure. Yeah, we'll talk about color here in a minute, Mary. All right. So, oh, I forgot to tell you how to use these. So lines and arrows are super foundational in our sketchnoting because we can use them to connect ideas, to show direction, to separate information, and to spark or to highlight. Just something like that. Okay. So so look at this. Look what I did here. I used an arrow here to connect that information. Okay. I could also use an arrow to show the direction. We're going from here to here. Just like that. All right. Separation. This could be a container, which we're going to talk about next, but it also could be a line, just the purple lines that I did ahead of time to show the separation between the start and the letters. Okay. And then we've got our spark lines. All right. So those are sort of 4 different ways that you can use lines and arrows interchangeably. Sometimes a line might work better. Sometimes an arrow might work better. These are sort of decisions a lot of the times that you make in the moment. All right. So we've started with our blank piece of paper. We talked about letters, and we just talked about how lines and arrows can help connect, show direction, separate information, and spark and highlight, spark/highlight. Okay. So containers honestly are my favorite. They're my favorite element. We're starting to get into a little bit more drawing elements here when we're talking about containers. All right, so we use containers to group information, to show what information lives together on your sketch note. We what are the other 2? To make I'm going to call it make meaning. It's not what I mean, but and to highlight, or like a subtitle. Okay. So let's say somebody's talking and they said 3 things. You could put those 3 ideas, because we're writing in our imaginary squares, remember, 1, 2, 3, and then we're putting containers around them and grouping them together. Okay, so instead of just having them sort of floating around the page and we don't know if they belong together or not, we create little containers around them. There's so many different ways you can do it, but I just kind of put them in these weird boxy blobs. To make meaning, we could use, let's say they're talking about a podcast, and we put the podcast information, then we draw our box, preferably. Did it the other way around, but preferably do your information first and then put the box around it so you don't run out of space. And then we're talking about a podcast, so we do like a little phone type image here. Okay. All right. Just to sort of like highlight that information and make it more meaningful to that information. And then sometimes we can use containers to highlight like a topic. So maybe can I use this? Maybe we have the title of our page at the top. but maybe we're gonna just write letters here because letters is an overarching idea of sketchnoting. And then we put a little speech bubble around it like that. Okay. And then you could put your information underneath of it. But we know it belongs together because it's underneath the container. It's like a little mini title, little subheading. Okay. So containers are fun because they can start. The reason why I like them so much because they're starting to introduce in some of those drawing elements, which can make it really, really simple. So if you've got your pen and your pencil and your paper, I'd love for you to draw along with me here. So we could just take like a square that's not perfectly square, just like has, I say has a little energy to it. I don't know if that's quite right. It could be like a little sticky note. You could just like leave it on its own. But you could add these like little half circles. And now it's a notepad. Okay. We can do this. Have another one. Add a little rectangle. And then add a little half of a square, I guess, or half of a rectangle. And now it's a clipboard. And let's do one more. We're gonna do like an oval. We're gonna do a square. And then we're gonna do a line. It's like a little push pin in the piece of paper. And we're gonna put little dots. All right, cool. So our information could be in there. And you can use those as you see fit to help group make meaning and highlight some information. All right, we're going to move right along here. Do you number pages as you go or leave them blank as you are now? Most of the time I'm creating a sketch note on one piece of paper instead of multiple here. But yeah, you could certainly number your pages so that they don't, so you kind of know what order they're in, or you could have a sketchbook and then they'd be in the order of the sketchbook. Lots of options. Okay, so people tend to be a very scary thing. People get freaked out that they can't even draw a stick person. But I am going to tell you, drawing stick people are great. If you want to just draw stick people, you can. But if you want to upgrade from a stick person, we're going to do a star person. So we're going to draw a star. And I'm just going to show you how one is made. These little elements here of the star are the arms. These elements are the legs, and the body and the head. Okay, so I usually start with the head, and then arm, leg. There you go. The great thing about star person is then you can move the arms and legs as you see fit. So maybe you want your little star person to point to something. So one arm is up and one arm is down. We can use those little spark lines, and maybe you have some information up here you wanted to really highlight. I think drawing people is really important because most of the time people are involved in these conversations that we're drawing out, and I think it's important to highlight them. So can you redraw that from the start, please? I'm assuming you're asking for the star person. So I'm going to do my circle. Yes, circle. And then just like we have our star arms and legs, I'm just doing like a triangle, and two. The great thing about star people, like they don't have to be proportionately like correct or anything. If you want to, you can also do like a box. I call it just a box person, and have lines for arms and legs. And sometimes I'll put little circles. Okay, same thing with these. You can put their arms up, down, around. They could be doing a yoga pose. You can do whatever you want. Can you show a star person running in motion? Man, okay, let's see here. I would probably do a circle kind of on the side, like this. Let's do the arm. I guess I'm doing a box, not a star person, sorry. Arm, something like that. I probably should have put this like straight and this one bent, but you get it. And then you can put like a line in behind them so it looks like they're standing like on a hill or something. Okay, cool. I dig the similarity to Keith Haring, especially with spark lines. Cool. Okay. Okay, Vicky, you're awesome. Okay. All right. Color. Okay. Okay, I'm running out of time here. Okay, so color. All right, I'm going to keep this super simple. Ideally, less is more. Okay, less is more. My general rule of thumb is 3 colors plus a black or like a dark color. You want to use your dark colors for your lettering and your writing, and your light colors for like highlighting. Try to avoid using like yellows or oranges in your lettering because it's harder to read later. For color wheel, if I can get this right quickly, purple, orange, no, red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Yeah, okay. So these colors beside each other in the color wheel, they're always going to go nicely. If you're not sure what colors to pick, they're always going to look nice together. If you want to go for that like wow factor, you pick the colors across from each other in the color wheel. So your purple, your yellow, your blue, your orange, and your red and your green are going to make it pop off the page. Okay. And then bonus here, I didn't really get a chance to talk about bullets, but they're really helpful when you're making lists. And if you really want to make something look like it's popping off the page, then I recommend introducing shadows, imagining your light source, and then putting the shadow on the opposite end. Okay, I know I'm running through this part really quickly. I apologize, but you don't have to use shadows, but it just like makes it really poppin', really nice. Okay. Are there any happy little trees asking? Yeah, I love Bob Ross. Happy little accidents. I channel Bob Ross in everything I do. Happy little accidents. Okay, now we have to start putting some of these pieces together, right? So those are like the drawing fundamentals. The sketchnoting process, which I'm just going to spend like 2 minutes on because I really want to answer some questions. Is the tricky thing is trying to do all of these things at the same time. You're trying to listen to information, you're trying to draw it out and try to make meaning. So the sketchnoting process, which I have come up with, is one part of it is listening. We have to listen to information. We have to make sense of what we're listening to, which can be one of the most challenging pieces. And then capture, which I just gave you a lot of the fundamentals on how to do that, some of those things. So practicing some of the elements in capture will allow you to give more focus on the listening and making sense. And then in the middle, doing this all together, is our visual language and our visual vocabulary. So the visual vocabulary we just started with. Okay, some of those pieces, you practice them. That's the beginning phases, steps to your visual vocabulary. And knowing that it is a visual language, just like any other language you're learning. If you were to learn a different spoken language, it's the same kind of thing. You're looking at translating information into those drawings. So we don't have time to talk about all of that today, but generally this is how it kind of comes together. So listening and making sense, I'll just leave you with a few little tips here is don't feel like you have to capture absolutely everything. The way that the dual coding theory works and how our brain processes information a lot of the time allows us to help remember things, even if it's not captured. So don't feel like you have to capture absolutely everything and let go of that because it's literally impossible to do. Listen for little key phrases that like the speaker or the person is saying, or how you emotionally connect with information. If you like, oh, that's really interesting, that's probably something that you should capture. right? So when you're doing sketchnoting for yourself, it's about your own process and what you want to remember. So just like tune into how you're feeling in the process as well. Sometimes people will set themselves up so you can lean into that and listen for those cues that they give, but people don't always do that. But